I was talking to the guy on the ferry, and he said something odd.
What was that?
He said bad things happen here.
This town has its secrets, but there's something rotten here.
The only thing that's going to get people killed here is a lack of infrastructure.
Well, that's because the island has lain dormant, but she's waking up. And that's when bad things happen. You think the fog out there is natural? No, it ain't natural. It's a haunt.
I was tricked by a devil and betrayed by my lessers. We couldn't even find vermin to sate our hunger. Some ate the corpses, others gorged on dirt. I was contemplating how to end my own life with my own hand when I saw it. But I was starving, and it was starving too. Covenant was offered for my settlement's salvation, and I signed that pact with my own blood.
What was it you saw?
A demon? The island itself?
You can't let people stay here. That's the end. The end is not right.
I thanked God, but something else came to me. Fulfill the pact, and the flames will stop. If I had refused, none of you would be here.
Maybe that would have been better.
Welcome to Widow's Bay. There's so much to see here.
Widow's Bay has officially come to an end, and while I've been covering the show almost every single episode since the millisecond it dropped, I have to be a little honest here. Every episode I was watching, I was waiting for the fall off. There's no way the show would remain consistent or rewarding, or at least just as enjoyable as the previous episode I watched before. Genuinely waiting for the point where the show fell into a specific groove or theme and became a bit repetitive. But I'm happy to say that every single episode provided something different for people to take away and genuinely allows for people to pick and choose which episode of the season is their favorite, but the overarching story remained intriguing enough to keep me coming back and theorizing every single week. But I know this show's doing well because as it was releasing and word of mouth continued to spread, those old videos I posted began boosting in views. It was really cool to watch the audience slowly grow and look for more clues or theories or breakdowns on YouTube and see other YouTubers slowly begin to pick up the series as well. Some YouTubers I'm even a huge fan of that ended up watching the show a little bit later on and only validated how good this show really was for me. So while I do personally want to go into why I think this was a spectacular first season of a television series, I will also illustrate some of my cons with the series that helps remind us that no show is perfect. But oh boy, this show really tries. But for now, we'll go ahead and start with the pros. For one, this series has fantastic sound design. While I can't really play too much of the sound design here due to copyright issues, I do feel it's very important to acknowledge how the sonic design really helped develop the ambiance and tones of the show altogether. This was originally produced music by David Fleming, who not only had a perfect little quirky theme for every one of the characters, but even themes that helped fit the specific monstrosities they would fight every single week. Sounds that would not only help fit the vibe of the scene, but also music that was a direct homage to some iconic sound design we've seen within horror history. Honestly, there were several moments in the show where the sound design specifically made me feel like it was really resemblant of shows like Atlanta. Atlanta being a show that cinematographers and directors like Hiro Murai also worked on, and it definitely shows within this series. Hiro Murai really helps immerse the viewer in these characters and their experiences. Whether it be long drawn out shots to capture an entire ensemble, or close-up shots to provide us the perspective of someone maybe tripping out on mushrooms. But there's also some narrative subtlety to some of these background shots as well. Like earlier in the season, when Tom really thought he solved all of the island's problems and was in supreme bliss, we could see Ruth trying to talk to him while being perfectly framed in front of a Francis Warren photo. Francis Warren being the only surviving descendant of Richard Warren who continued his bloodline altogether. But Hiro Murai is also somehow able to catch the same humorous vibe or elements that you'll find in mockumentary series like The Office or Parks and Rec, yet while still maintaining a more traditional cinematic style of filming. And speaking of Parks and Rec, let's give some major props to Katie Dippold, someone who originally wrote the script for this series to be more akin to Parks and Rec altogether, yet decided instead to lean more into the serious horror aspects, which honestly is another creative decision that paid off well in the long run. Katie Dippold's narrative implementation throughout this series was nothing short of phenomenal. Earlier I brought up Parks and Rec, and you can really feel some of the same energies between these shows, like the sequences with the town hall meetings.
For what? For what?
Yet, this show also is able to balance its humor with its horror very well. Maintaining a balance between both humor and horror this consistently is a feat in and of itself, as it's very hard to really implement humor into a horror series without it being a movie or a shorter story altogether. But this implementation of humor could also lead to be the show's detriment over time, or at least the very thing that kills the show should it get many more seasons. But I'll get more into that during the cons section of the video. Another thing Katie does well with this show's narrative is its subtle foreshadowing. Like how in episode 1, Rosemary brings up how a guy she knew she ran genealogy on and found out he had syphilis. Her genealogy skills coming into direct play by the time the series was over. Or Patricia with lying about the boogeyman, claiming that she still slept with a dresser in front of her door even in modern day, yet when we cut to scenes of her within her house, she sleeps with the door wide open. Or there's Evan's foreshadowing when he's reading his mom's letters and he talks about a secret mother.
Dear Evan, everyone has two mothers, a mother and a secret mother.
I told her I was her secret mommy.
In regards to even more shadowing, there was also a notable Widow's Bay historical video where we can see it was not only mostly made by Jerry, but that when she did make it, she dedicated it to her brother Mark Doyle, who had died in Wick's previous story when he was younger. Or there's even the Patricia's dance scene, where you can spot a few punch zombies in the background as the camera's spinning around her while she's dancing. Or there's even more subtlety, like when Tom goes to confront Ruth and glances at a sign claiming that good things come to those who wait, which honestly couldn't have been more true for Tom's exact circumstance here, because not only would Bashir eventually come to shoot down Ruth anyways, but Evan and PJ would have accidentally triggered another sacrifice altogether. That plus the fact that him waiting so long to eventually take her out did inevitably result in her revealing the big Richard Warren descendant mystery involving Evan altogether. Speaking of this entire circumstance, I thoroughly enjoyed Tom's desperation to keep Evan safe throughout this entire season, while simultaneously juggling being a manager of an island where so many people could get hurt or die. It makes perfect sense for Tom's character to actually contemplate getting rid of Ruth altogether as a problem, but also be just a little too scared to go through with the act. Tom's darker side has existed since the very first episode, with him, despite all of his life experiences, including that with his wife, still trying to maintain this blissful ignorance that all of the superstitions of the island are just that, superstitions. Him lying about Shep going missing to calm everyone down and just assuming he'll show up later. And I thoroughly enjoyed how they slowly introduced Tom's character and his history through dialogue with other characters, like him discussing the mainland superstition with the author that came down, not only being a key element to the overall story, but also a central part of Tom's character. This show handles its exposition for its characters very well, and definitely puts a solid amount of faith into its audience intelligence. And while I could definitely keep gushing about the show and its pros, I feel it's only fair to cover some of my cons with the series. The first big con of the show, longer episode times. or at least varying times that allow the show to explore its narrative with whatever time it needs to. For example, some of these stories really do fit into a 30-minute time frame. A great example of an episode that could do for some longer runtime would be like the Richard Warren flashback where we see Sarah. The episode suggests that she was really only there for a couple of days before everything went down, and while that might be true, it would have been way more impactful if we got to really resonate with her story a little bit longer. If Apple TV's smart, they'll give the Widow's Bay creators total free range over how long the duration of each episode is, allowing them to have smaller episodes that are 30 minutes and cover a specific story, or have episodes that are even longer than an hour to fully include all the narrative details it needs to. Hell, if you even wanted to milk the series, once it's all said and done, you could even have Widow's Bay specials or little things like Amazon did with Invincible, where you could have flashbacks to different events of Widow's Bay history to take up one specific little special episode, or at least one-off stories altogether. Another con I had was with Wick's storyline regarding Jerry specifically. While Wick and his own personal history with the island did come off well and paid off exactly how it should have, especially considering he's so relieved by the end to think everything is actually solved, when it came to being involved with other characters, especially that like Tom, he seemed more like a side character. So when we get these small moments involving Wick by himself, it's mostly involving Jerry as well. The lack of anything substantial coming between the relationship between Jerry and him so far is a real missed opportunity by the end of season 1. However, it does leave a lot of doors open for where they could take their characters in season 2. I personally have been claiming in my videos that Jerry is untrustworthy, and when I do my season 2 predictions video, I'll definitely include why. Another con I had was with the shaman. I personally really enjoyed the shaman's involvement and almost liked every single scene with him, but I do feel, unless they find some mystical way to bring him back from the heavens, that he was severely underutilized. Of all the characters to actually lose their life to these incidences, I feel like the shaman was one of the few side characters who could have had a lot more to play throughout the rest of the series, as opposed to people like Garrett or the several other old men that don't really do much but provide ominous superstition folktales. That being said, if the series does continue and the shaman happens to return from the heavens with newfound knowledge or wisdom, that will be a perfect way to keep implementing his character within the deeper narratives. It would also raise some serious questions with all the people who got sucked up before in the town's previous storms. Another con I have was the choreography. During times it felt very questionable, as you get moments like Bashir running out of the gas station with a shotgun ready to blast, yet totally floundering once the boogeyman starts stepping towards him. Sure, he could have just been left in shock after he threw a guy into the woods like a baseball, but I guess the choreography here just really made Bashir look less competent than he should have been. Another con I have, which is also easily rectified by a future season, is that the Richard Warren timeline and ancestral history took way too long as a segment for an episode. For analytical YouTuber types like myself, it did provide a lot of fuel and substance to put down an entire Widow's Bay timeline video at some point. But should none of these events or names actually carry any weight throughout the rest of the series, this joke just went on a little too long. However, once again, this is the show sort of balancing both its humor and comedic elements, as this entire segment could be very pivotal to the future of the series as well. I still don't fully trust Rosemary's genealogy skills. Another con I personally had was that the humor just felt a bit much at times. While it never overstayed its welcome, and this is purely a subjective preference, I just feel there was a few episodes throughout this series that balanced its humor and horror in a more 70-30 split as opposed to a 50-50. And again, don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed the comedic elements of this show as compared to many other shows or movies. Hence why I even have an entire compilation of the show's funniest moments up on the channel. That being said, while the show did blend these elements well, I think they should tone it back on the humor a little bit, or at least go a little more subtle with it. But they also kind of have to be careful with how dramatic they make the show as well, as they don't really want to fully depend on drama to keep the series pushing, like in shows of The Walking Dead or Game of Thrones. And we all know how those shows ended. That being said, I have a lot more faith in how Widow's Bay could potentially end in comparison to those shows. Another thing this series does really well is how it handles its characters. Patricia is a standout within this series, whose character is so reminiscent of other characters like Wendy from The Shining, and should Welcome to Derry get a Halloran spinoff, I would seriously like to see Patricia implemented somehow as a future Wendy. Or even if they just do a remake altogether, as a Halloran spinoff should be a prequel. Either way, I won't get into that now. Check out my Welcome to Derry videos if you're interested. The thing that makes Patricia great is she's simultaneously loyal, weird, badass, and dorky at the same time. time. Someone who is anything but perfect, but her own plethora of insecurities being a direct result of her faults, with her desperation to be included, eventually resulting in her lying about something pretty messed up in regards to the boogeyman. But to be fair, she did just lie as a kid, which is something kids do all the time, and she only told 1 or 2 people before they decided to spread the rumor and she felt like she had to double down. Either way, she's the character I'm rooting for most throughout this series so far. I mean, even after thinking she saved the island, it was cool to watch how she still struggled with her self-confidence, shown in the scene with her dinner order being messed up, only to, throughout the very same episode, gain more confidence while dealing with the boogeyman, only this time dealing with him for real. Patricia still maintains her humble composure and her kind heart, being the only one to try to pull Tom away from his dark thoughts and decisions regarding Ruth. And even in the sequence where Tom is struggling to decide what to do and Wick is pushing him just to take Ruth out, you could see Patricia try to talk some sense into him, and notice how the shot literally lines her up with the lighthouse while Tom's debating this moral decision. Her literally being his lighthouse or guiding light here. And I truly do think that Patricia could have been capable of luring Tom away from this decision. Unfortunately, since this decision does involve the direct safety of his son, it was already a losing battle. Patricia may not realize how much easier it is to do the morally right thing when you have literally no friends or family you also have to watch out for. Of course, while I can understand Tom and Bashir's actions here, I still side with Patricia's mentality fully. That being said, while I do enjoy when Tom can come off as a bit more comedic, even sometimes resembling that of Michael Scott from The Office, I do hope over the seasons of the show we can see him slowly descend towards a darker path like we saw with Richard Warren. Heck, I'd even like a flashback episode in future seasons to show Richard Warren on his voyage to the island. We could see what his character was like before he ended up making that pact, and there's honestly a big chance he was a lot more like Tom. And with the same entity having reached out through Tom and maybe attempting to make a new pact altogether, we can slowly see Tom's dark side slowly start to surface more and more as the seasons progress. To contrast this, you could have Patricia slowly acknowledge her faults and mistakes, gain a lot more confidence, and become sort of the final girl hero of the island altogether, to juxtapose Tom's darker turn of events. But then where would that leave the character of Wick? Well, while he does have a lot more storyline in regards to the history of the island and what he's experienced, but unless Jerry turns out to be more malicious or suspicious than we originally thought, Wick's only other option would be a sort of cliche self-sacrificing to keep others safe, or even just being straight up betrayed by characters like Tom or Bashir. However, because I enjoy Wick so much and don't want to see him go until the show's final season, I think it would be a better idea to have him be the character who sort of explores the island. We could see per the Widow's Bay map that there's a lot more to explore and potentially many more mysteries you could find. So while Tom could get stuck managing things like the townsfolk, his son, or his darker inclinations altogether, and while Patricia could be tied more to the Coven storyline or the Boogeyman storyline, Wick could be our POV into discovering more of the island and uncovering more of its secrets and lore. It's nice that by the end of season 1, we have 3 very strong character perspectives with a lot of narrative potential for where their characters could go. And while some characters are a bit suspicious for me, like Jerry and Rosemary, Dale is a character who I was suspicious of only until this recent episode, as now he's the only one who knows of the sacrifices and what they're needed for, learning that there needs to be a sacrifice for every time the bell tolls. And with season 1 starting off with the bell ringing 9 times and the season 1 ending with the bell ringing 8, we're now stuck in a struggle of whether or not they're gonna end the Richard Warren bloodline altogether or sacrifice 8 more people. Widow's Bay potentially becoming an actual tourist trap. I personally think we should throw PJ in there, but that's just me. But the finale of this series also left some beautiful miscommunication and misunderstandings to take place going forward. Like, while Dale may know about the sacrifices and the videos that he saw, he doesn't know that Kenny was literally sacrificed to stop the storm they were currently enduring. Sacrificed by both Evan and PJ who is known to be a piece of shit by Tom, and only proven by the fact that he got Kenny killed, but notice how he's also always trying to put Evan in dangerous situations with his dares. Now, while I fully think PJ is just a dumb kid and potentially he has family who knows more about what's going on the island, but in regards to him, he doesn't really seem too malicious. However, there is the narrative potential of him subtly trying to get Evan killed over time because he thinks he is Richard Warren's last descendant. But it's more likely that he's just a jerk altogether. We have to ask ourselves if Evan will ever open up to Tom about what happened with Kenny. We can assume he'll only want to be off the island even more after seeing what happened, so Tom's gonna have a hard time keeping him there unless he straight up tells him the truth about his bloodline, which will also maybe put him at risk of Evan potentially deciding to sacrifice himself to to save the island. So Tom is really stuck between a rock and a hard place, especially considering Tom doesn't really know anything about the sacrifice of Kenny. Em probably still being confused why the storms on the island stopped despite Ruth still being alive. Ruth barely surviving the gunshot that Bashir gave her, which I personally thought was a really good direction to take his character. I fully thought him and Tom were gonna duke it out in regards to keeping Ruth safe, but it makes sense that his desperation to save his child would result in him taking some very serious actions like this. It's also interesting how much Tom and Bashir reflect each other narratively, both slowly coming to realize that the island superstitions are in fact real, and both desperate to protect their very own kids. And it's only a matter of time before Bashir and Tom butt heads over what to do with Evan. All that being said, this was a fantastic series. I got both a timeline of all the dates and events that we've heard of throughout the show coming out here soon, as well as another video where I'll be breaking down all of the narrative potential we could see in this show's future seasons. So subscribe and keep an eye out for those videos, which will be released very soon. But I'll leave this review off with this. It was a fantastic show, amazing cinematography, amazing sound design, and amazing narrative, with my only real grand worry that can't be solved with future seasons is that of them leaning too hard into the humorous elements and struggling to maintain the balance between both humor and horror altogether. Considering this first season had a lot of the residents coming to terms with the fact that the island is in fact paranormal, the future seasons of the show could really linger more on the dramatic mystery elements. There's still many tourists on the island with brand new fresh perspectives on different horror stories you want to introduce, and there's still much more of the island to explore, as well as 400 years of history to go through. Thematically, within these episodes, it's a lot easier to spend time building up suspense for something horrific than building up suspense for something comedic, as comedy is a lot more of a subjective genre as opposed to horror, which is pretty straightforward in regards to how the narrative is displayed. Either way, all of the production, all of the staff, all of the actors, and all of the creatives that were involved in creating this fantastic first season of television definitely knocked it out of the park. This is what we need more of within the creative sphere. Original characters, original stories, a show that doesn't hold the hands of its audience and puts faith in their intelligence. Honestly, the only thing that would make this show a 10 out of 10 for every single season going forward is if they hired someone like MudLuv. For what? I don't know, but please, I'm so poor.
Welcome to Widow's Bay. There's so much to see here. Come with me. I'll show you around.